You know, I've always loved this graphic that Andrew has picked out for the Genesis class, sort of an introductory to the class most week. Beautiful. Look out over the earth and over the galaxies and out into the, which is an unrealistic picture. It's made up, but still, because you wouldn't get that picture from Earth. But I don't know whether you've heard any of the recent news about the Webb telescope, which is the latest telescope we've got up there, that has looked out further into the universe than any other telescope has. It's a special one that uses radio waves, I think. And it's brought back these images from places like 13.5 million light years away. Now, evolutionary astronomers will tell you that's looking back in time 13.5 million years, which it's not. How long did it take God to make the universe, by the way? Well, yes. How about the stars and everything? Just a day. So we know it's not going back that far. The Earth is only 10 to 15,000 years old, creation, as far as my understanding, looking at the Bible chronology. But it's interesting, just recently, this Webb telescope has looked, what the evolutionary astronomers will say is back that far. It can look that distance now. And what they expected to find, they didn't find. What they expected to find were immature galaxies forming back at the beginning, closely after the Big Bang. Because if you're going to have full-formed galaxies and you believe in the Big Bang, you got to have little galaxies and pre-galaxies. And so they look back there, and what they find is not that at all. What they see is something like this, which is very hard to see. Matt, could you hit the light up here for just a second, just so we not showing much. This is a dark picture. There, thank you. Very good. In here in the middle is the main resolution picture that the Webb telescope is getting out. Just a pinpoint looking out, just a pinpoint. You have that many things in the picture, but what they've seen is that what they're finding here is these huge galaxies, fully formed, just like we have closer and closer distance. And it's really set them off. Some of these scientists, I wish I brought some of the quotes, are saying we have to re-examine everything we know about the origin of the universe. And so it's just an amazing thing. Since this is a class about Genesis and beginnings, and Andrew went over, you can turn that back off there. I'll advance to our next slide. We'll get going with where we left off last week. But it's just, to me, amazing that the more science finds out, more scientists seem to discover, the more it looks like that the evidence supports creation. God made it all the way he did in the time that he said in those first few days of creation. And the best scientists in the world have their own ideas, but they don't line up with what the Bible says. So that's just something, kind of an interesting bit of information that I've read about this last week about these galaxies that aren't what they expected at all. So let's take off here where we left off. We left off last week in Genesis here, chapter 24, where Abraham's servant was commissioned to go out and find a wife for his son Isaac. And he came to Haran, likely the city of Nahor, I think it's called. And as he came to that place, verse 1 here, verse 15, and it happened before he had finished speaking, behold, Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother, came out with her pitcher on her shoulders. So here comes Rebekah, exactly the way that the servant was praying for, and gives him a drink, feeds all his camels. Talked about that last week in our next slide. And then the servant brings Rebekah back to where Isaac is staying in Belaroi. And in verse, 66, and the servant told Isaac all these things that he had done. Then Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent. And he took Rebekah, and she became his wife. And he loved her, so Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. That's where we left off. So we're going to head on to the next chapter. Oh, yeah. Mike, before we head off to the next chapter.
You know, reflecting on this story, there's a significant moment, I think, that I've overlooked for so many years. And that is, that, is it Bethuel, the brother of Rebekah? Is that right? Bethuel.
Is the brother, or Laban is?
Laban, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
okay.
right.
The servant asks, I want to get going the next day. I want to get going tomorrow. I want to get right back to, my master. And a very unusual thing for Laban to say, well, let's ask the girl. Let's ask her. I mean, that was not, typically the procedure, And interestingly as well is Rebekah says, yes, I will go with this servant. And when we think about the promise being made through Isaac, that all the nations of the world will be blessed, and we think about Christ, and we think about the church, what a fitting example that is, that once, Christ found the church, his bride, that she respond, yes, I will go with him immediately. That there's no tarrying in the old world, so to speak, but she's willing and ready to go right then and there.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Good point. Appreciate that. Which brings us up to speed here. Next chapter, chapter 25, primarily deals with the death of Abraham, but we'll also be looking to see the birth of Esau and Jacob. And then also Esau sells his birthright. That's all in this chapter. So let's get started in there. And Genesis 25, verses 1 beginning. Abraham again took a wife. So this is after Sarah is dead. And her name was Keturah. At least it seems like it's after Sarah is dead. And we're going to look at this and just see that even though most of the events of Genesis are chronological, they're not always perfectly linear. What happens is that the narrative will focus on a particular person or time and then shift to something else. And sometimes things are left out of perfect sequence. And we'll see that in a couple of examples a little bit later. Now, was this wife it says, and again, Abraham took a wife, her name was Keturah. Is that happening right now, or is this looking back a little bit? Now, if this is happening right now, he has more children. And she bore him Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, Shusha, Jokshan. And then Jokshan begot Sheba and Dedan, and the sons of Dedan were the Asherim, not the gods, but Letushim and Lemim. And the sons of Midian were Ephah, Epher, Hanok, Abidah, and Eldah. All these were the children of Keturah. See, even in this context, you can see that what we've got is he married Keturah. She had children, and then they had children. That didn't all happen at the same time. It's just giving an expanse of a description of what's going to happen or what will happen. And so he may have taken his wife at this time, and this particular chronology. If so, then God continued to grant him the ability to have children, which was a very unusual thing for him to do back when he had Isaac, if you remember. He was beyond the age of childbearing, as was Sarah. So either way, either he took a wife later, or this is a wife he took when Sarah was probably maybe still alive. I just don't think you can tell necessarily by the context because it's not perfectly linear. We'll see that in a bit here. But anyway, point is, he took a wife, another wife, and Abraham gave all that he had to Isaac, but Abraham gave gifts to the sons of the concubines, which Abraham had. And while he was still living, he sent them eastward, away from Isaac, his son, to the country of the east. So he's separating out the promised son, Isaac, from all the rest. He said, now it says here his concubines. A concubine could refer to somebody who was married or was not married, and if they were married, they weren't the chief wife. Isaac or Sarah was the one the promise and the blessings were coming through. So Keturah, it was like he referred to as a concubine here, as well as Hagar, who's never said anything about her ever being a wife. She was always the maid to Sarah. So it's never mentioned that she's anything more than the maid, but still a concubine in the position that she served. Okay, so he separates the children out. They go off into the east, away from probably in Arabia, some area in Arabia that they're living. And verse 7, this is the sum of the years of Abraham's life which he lived, 175 years. Then Abraham breathed his last and died in a good old age, an old man and full of years, and was gathered to his people. And his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah, which is before Mamre, in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar the Hittite. We studied about that last week, about the cave of Machpelah when Sarah died, and Abraham found a place to bury her. Interesting that, remember, Ishmael was sent out and away from, actually twice. But Hagar was sent away from Sarah, was upset with her a couple times. And so the last time we read about Ishmael, he's off somewhere else with, living. But when Abraham, his father, dies, he comes back. He's not maybe that far away. Perhaps the family still has relations. Sarah just wanted him away. Maybe after Sarah died, Abraham was fine with having him closer. So, let's see here. 5 years. Let's finish the context here. Or Mamre the Hittite, the field which Abraham purchased from the sons of Heth, there Abraham was buried, and Sarah his wife. And it came to pass after the death of Abraham that God blessed his son Isaac. And Isaac dwelt at Bir-Lahai-Roi. I'm not going to get that right. Bir-Lahai-Roi, which we've talked about before. It's a little bit further south than where Abraham generally dwelt. So, Abraham lived 175 years. So he lived 75 years after the birth of Isaac, and another 38 years after Sarah's death. And he lived an average age as far as the people that lived during that time. His grandfather lived 148 years. His father lived 205 years. And then Isaac, his son, will live 180 years. Jacob, 147, his grandson. So he didn't live exceptionally long, but he lived a long and good life. As it says here, let's see, 100, is this the context? Yeah, good old age, full of years there in verse 8. Okay, this is what you can. We're just getting through the narrative here. Not a whole lot of stuff happening at this particular time other than what the context says. Chapter 25, verse 12 and 18. Now this is the genealogy of Ishmael. So we'll look at him for a minute. Abraham's son, whom Hagar, the Egyptian, Sarah's maidservant, bore to Abraham. Now, if you remember this chart, which we're just going to take a little look at, if you want copies of any of these, let me know. This is one we looked at last week, that on the left side are the descendants of Noah, which are Shem, Japheth, and Ham. And then basically all the red is going to be the lineage that the promise comes through. And we come down to Abraham here. So what we're going to be looking at right here is, okay, Abraham's sons through Ishmael. And his prodigy becomes great nations. And so we see here, let's read, bore to Abraham, and these were the names of the sons of Ishmael by their names according to their generations. Again, we don't follow these names pretty much at all because they don't continue to follow the course of the Bible narrative as we go on after these chapters. But it's here, so we'll read it. The firstborn of Ishmael was Nebajoth, and then Kedar, and then Adbeel, Mibsam, Mishma, Duma, Massa, Hadar, Tema, Jutur, Naphish, and Kedema. These were the sons of Ishmael, and these were their names by their towns and their settlements, 12 princes according to their nations. So they became nations, and these were the Ishmaelites that we read about, and they go off into different directions and become nations. They were great, not as great as, of course, Abraham or Isaac or Jacob would be. And these were the years of the life of Ishmael, 137 years. And he breathed his last and died and was gathered to his people. They dwelt from Havilah as far as Shur, which is east of Egypt as you go toward Assyria. And he died in the presence of all his brethren. So let's look for a second. Where are the Ishmaelites going to be dwelling or living? It says from Havilah, which is not really certain. They think Havilah is somewhere around this area, but this guy that has a map puts it right about there. And then Shur is more certain, somewhere in this area. Again, they're not sure where Shur is. But I had to get that before you did, but pretty sure. Okay, so in this general area toward, as it says, Assyria, and occupied this area. Again, away from where Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are in this area right here were dwelling. They went off. And of course, we read through history the different challenges the children of Israel would have with some of these nations. Michael.
You know, we have to ask ourselves, why is Genesis including these genealogies? What do we care? And the only conclusion that we can reach is that ultimately these genealogies uphold the promise given through Abraham that through his seed all the nations of the earth would be blessed, and ultimately points to Jesus Christ. Notice that after Christ, the church doesn't keep genealogies. There's no genealogy of
Right.
Peter had these children and they had these, and then there is nothing
Sure,
of that.
that's
because
right.
it's a spiritual kingdom, not a physical kingdom.
Yeah, and I think some of this is done because, just like you say, to show that God worked in the kingdoms of men and his plan was fulfilled just like he said it was going to be through certain people at certain times. And Abraham was the one that was going to be blessed and his children, and that's what happened. History shows. And even Ishmael is blessed because he's a child of Abraham, but not according to the promise. Don.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a couple of things concerning these genealogies. Sometimes in these genealogies, there's some significant figures, like for example, Keturah's son Midian. You know, Midian. Does that ring a bell? And also you were saying that you know about Ishmael and I Ishmael and Isaac getting together to bury his father. A lot of death brings a lot of people together.
It does.
You know,
it does.
like for example, there were a lot of people here to remember Robert, right?
Yes.
And then you remember the 9/11 disaster, how all those deaths brought the whole country together against the terrorists and everything. So death does bring a lot of people together, and oftentimes that togetherness doesn't last for very long, but at least it, you know.
Yeah.
It
Better to
usually
be
does.
in the house of mourning than the house of rejoicing. There's
Amen.
reasons for that. So in this case with Abraham, yes, brought together some of his family that may not have been around a lot because they were sent away. Okay, moving on. Again, we're just going to go through this narrative here. We'll get to some exciting things and interesting things and important things here as we go. In verse 19. Now this is a genealogy of Isaac. So we had Ishmael, but here's Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham begot Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah as wife, the daughter of Bethuel, the Syrian, of Padanaram, the sister of Laban, the Syrian. We read about that. Now Isaac pleaded with the Lord for his wife because she was barren. Okay, now we have a different thing. We're not going to read off the lineage of Isaac right now because he didn't have any. In fact, he goes 20 years, he and Rebekah, before they have any children. Kind of similar to Abraham, who went many years before they had children when he married Sarah. So now Isaac pleaded with the Lord for his wife because she was barren, and the Lord granted his plea, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. But the children struggled together within her, and she said, "If all is well, why am I like this?" So she went to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord said to her, I don't know exactly what she did, if she just prayed and the Lord responded, or if there was another means, but it says she went to the Lord. And he responds, 2 nations are in your womb. 2 peoples shall be separated from your body. 1 people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. So here's what God said. This is what's going on. Some kind of struggle inside you that's going to foresee or foreshow something that's going to happen when these kids are after they're born. That there's going to be a struggle, and the older is going to serve the younger, which just doesn't happen. It's always the other way around. The younger serves the older. In verse 24. So when her days were fulfilled for her to give birth, indeed there were twins in her womb, and the first came out red. He was like a hairy garment all over, so they called his name Esau, which means, actually not, Edom. But what? No, it means hairy. It means hairy. Later we'll see that his other name, Edom, means red. But here it's the hairy part that Esau means. So he's hairy. A pretty distinctive thing in the case as you compare him with his brother here. Afterward, his brother came out, and his hand took hold of Esau's heel, so his name was called Jacob. So Jacob actually means supplanter, somebody who takes the authority. And this is also foreshadowing something that God had planned to do. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. So here it is, 20 years from when he married Rebekah, because that was at 40 years. So the boys grew, and Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field. He was like a Grizzly Adams, Jeremiah Johnson. You ever watch those shows? The guys are just out there, and the wilderness was like their backyard. That was like what Esau was like. But Jacob was a mild man, dwelling in tents. A mild basically comes from just plain. There was nothing unusual or spectacular about him. Like Esau was pretty significant. He lived out the wilderness, and it doesn't say that Jacob was a wimp. He simply lived in dwelling in tents and did whatever you did when you were dwelling in tents. You had your flocks. You had your different industry that you would have as somebody who was a sojourner in the land. And Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Anybody else that favored someone that you can think of, not too long distance in our study in Genesis, there's somebody else who favors one of his children, doesn't? Jake and Joseph. Yeah, we look down here and, ooh, that's not where I wanted to be. Let me get to that in a second. Okay, go ahead, Mike. My point is out of order from my slides here.
So I only have a question and no answers or speculation, but it's always surprised me that Isaac favored Esau. I mean, Esau was an ungodly man, and Isaac was an extremely godly man, and to this day, I've never quite understood that, but I'm throwing it out at you because you really know a lot.
Yeah, right. I don't understand why parents would ever get into the position of favoring any of their children. I love Sam equally as I love Sarah. No distinction. Treat them the same. If I do a favor for one, I'm going to do a favor for the other, just so they don't feel like, one's favorite. So it says here he favored him because he ate his game. So that was something that he really thought was great. I don't know if he disliked Jacob, but he just had an affinity for this Jeremiah Johnson type of does anybody know who Jeremiah Johnson was? Okay. I mean, this rough guy that just, manly man and tough and, like me. No, I'm not like that at all, actually. He just preferred that as the kind of person that he drew close to. But yeah, you're right. He was ungodly. He didn't value the things that were important to God. We'll see that real quickly here. So don't know, Don.
It seems like Isaac liked to be taken care of more, and so Esau was taking care of Isaac, whereas perhaps Rebekah, who was the one who was going back and forth, feeding, getting water for those camels and all that, seemed to like to. Be the more provider. So and Jacob was more the one who needed to be provided for because he was the mild one. He was the one who didn't. So it was like the opposite was taken care of. Esau was taking care of Isaac, but Rebekah was taking care. But Rebekah was taking care of Jacob.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Yeah, course, what it says is this is the reason why. He basically wasn't, he didn't prefer them for any other reason than I think that we can say specifically then he just liked to eat his game. But Rebekah loved Jacob. Now, I was going to bring up a little thing here before we got into this verse. This is what came up. Back here, let's back up a little bit. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. I wanted to look at something here because here's one of these, though the Genesis is chronological, it's not perfectly chronological. We look at this chart, we'll see that even though we've read that Abraham has died now and buried, he actually lives 15 years into the life of Jacob and Esau. If you just do the simple math, when you look at the lineages, we have Abraham and Isaac here, rather Abraham and Sarah living here. Sarah dies earlier. Isaac is born and lives, and Jacob and Esau are born, and Abraham doesn't die for another 15 years. So even though we've read the chapter about Abraham's death, still it was because we were talking about that particular subject, and now that we're dealing with this, we look at the fact that it looks like Abraham was still around for a bit. So again, not perfectly chronological, just generally chronological, we see here in the account. I love these timelines. I got to show you this one here. And again, if you want this is from the beginning, from Adam down to Joseph. And just bear with me for a minute. Look how long people lived back before Abraham. They lived average 900 years. You got Adam and Seth and Canaan. You've got Jared. What happened to Enoch? He only lived 365 years. Mike says he smoked. Well, what happened to Enoch? He was taken to heaven. Why was he? Because he walked with God. Wow, what an exciting thing there. And then you got Methuselah after Enoch, and he lived the longest, 969 years. And then Lamech, 777. But Noah, and again, the green is before their first child. So when they have their first child, it kind of turns blue, if you see that. I mean, that's the time up to they have their first child. That helps you kind of look a little bit at the chronology here. But Noah lived 950 years, 350 years after the flood, which means he was alive during Abraham's time. Noah was still alive. Now, my question is, he was alive for like another 65 years or 58 years after Abraham was born. Did Abraham hang out with Noah? I wonder that stuff. Wouldn't you want to go talk to Noah and say, hey, how was that voyage? So, these things aren't covered. So much in the Bible isn't covered that maybe it would be interesting to know. And actually, the life of Abraham, all we have is few little things, and he lived 175 years. So we only have certain things that God wants us to know. But I just think these things are interesting, that Noah was still around. 10 generations after Noah, Abraham comes along, and Noah is still alive. Wow. What's that? I'm trying to figure out where Eber.
Right after Stalin.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, how long he lives, clear out, yeah. Yeah. Do you feel kind of cheated? We only live like 80, 90 years. I don't know. Not really. I don't feel cheated at all. I don't know. I don't think it's any different. If you live 900 years, is it really any different than living 90 years? Because when you get to the end of the 900 years, you're still going to die. So, Mike, sorry.
A little bit of trivia for those who may not know. Eber is the one from whom we get the term Hebrew.
Oh, okay.
Eber, or Hebrew.
All right. Interesting. Have to.
Yeah, Shem was where you get Semitic.
Yeah. Right. And I know you can't see the years back there, but if you want this chart, just let me know. Easy to send it. Okay, but this is kind of where some of these events overlap with different people, and it's not always exactly the way that the context says. You have to put it all into perspective. Okay, so we have this problem. Isaac loved Esau because he ate his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Okay, going on. Oh, no, don't going on yet. I can emphasize this part about Isaac. And we have that example of back in Genesis 37:3, that Israel, who's Jacob, his name changed to Israel, loved Joseph more than all his children because he was the son of his old age. Also, he made him a tunic of many colors. Now, you know what? Okay, Israel, that's Jacob's name that's changed. You'd think he would figure out this whole thing about favoring somebody, you know, like his dad preferred his brother. Well, why did he make the same mistake?
Because his dad made the same
It could be. You know, it's one thing we should do as children is learn to follow our parents where they are doing good, and not to do the things that you know that they're doing that aren't good. So, yeah, so this happens again here, just a generation down the line, that somebody's favored, and that leads into a lot of trouble, but we'll wait to get there. Go ahead, Mike. Wait for Matt.
So we can't read the mind of Jacob, but we have some clues, right? He had 4 wives, but the one he wanted, the wife he chose, the only one really that he pursued was Rachel, right? So maybe, I don't know. I'm just saying that maybe he was a little bit bitter at Leah because she didn't speak up, you know, the night that they consummated the marriage. And Rachel wanted him to give her children by her handmaid. I don't know, but maybe, I mean, look, the favored son was from Rachel, the favored and chosen wife.
Yeah.
So it had to be part of it.
Of course, again, what the context is because he was a child of his old age.
Yeah, it does say that. So
You know,
it's never,
for
I
that
would agree
reason,
with it then.
We know for sure, but who knows what else. Yeah, true. Matt.
There seems to be a common theme in this where Abraham took 25 years after his promise to have Isaac, and then there's 20 years before Isaac and Jacob after that. And so there's also between Jacob or Israel and Joseph where Rachel was barren, and then there were the baby wars. And
Yes.
he was like number 10
Yeah.
out of 12. So old age could also be the fact that the favored wife was barren for so many years and finally got the one that he wanted, for lack of a better phrase.
Good point. Interesting how God gives these men the promise of the lineage and the inheritance, and then lets them wait for years and years before they have their first child. It's that, I think, is that thing about he just wants to see their faith. Are they going to give up on my promise, or are they going to realize, no, I'm going to keep it, just wait, which is a tremendous example to who? You and me, I hope, that we know God says he'll bless us and keep us and protect us and help us, but we don't see it sometimes happening right now. We'll wait for him to work. And this, like these, examples of old, had to wait until God fulfilled his promise. Mike.
And the other thing that I think we see in these, since we're talking about these cases of preference towards certain children, is that the reasons which the parent or the fathers had to show preference were carnal reasons. They were purely carnal. They were, I like to eat the food he serves me, and with Joseph, I like that he's the son of Rachel and that he's the son of my old age. And so, as you said, we need to, in our own lives, distinguish examples that really aren't the way God would have them to be from those that are.
Yeah, good point. Moving on, verse 29. Now Jacob cooked a stew, and Esau came in from the field, and he was weary. Excuse me. And Esau said to Jacob, please feed me with that same red stew, for I am weary. Therefore his name was called Edom. Okay, now Edom means red. Okay, so yeah, he's got 2 names, Esau hairy and Edom red. Excuse me. But Jacob said, sell me your birthright as of this day. And Esau said, look, I'm about to die, so what is this birthright to me? And Jacob said, "Swear to me of this day." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. And Jacob gave Esau bread and stew of lentils. Then he ate and drank, arose, and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. Okay, now, it says here he sold him his birthright. Now, even though he was offering the stew, we don't know if there was some other price that was paid. Could have been. Birthrights are sold sometimes for a certain amount of money. And so it could have been that it was both, but it's not said here. It just says he sold it. And how bad off was Esau right here? Is there any tip that maybe he wasn't, that impending death was upon him? You get any tip at all in this chapter? Or was he that grievously hungry? I got a couple of tips that maybe in this chapter that he's not. If you're almost at the point of death from starvation, can you walk in? Can you come in from the field? Can you go and arose and as soon as you eat, walk out again? If you look at people who are starved for whatever reason and don't have food, they cannot even get up at all for even a few days after they eat. So I don't know. I don't know for sure. I'm thinking he wasn't that close to death. He walked in, he walked out. He was really hungry and weary, it says. I'm going to die. What's my birthright going to? I mean, I don't know for sure, but okay, Don.
I see a connection here that he was impatient. It says, "They that wait upon the Lord will renew their strength." We need patience.
Yeah.
This is showing us an example of what happens if you are impatient.
There you go. And of course, we're going to see here in a minute, he doesn't respect something that is extremely valuable and important to God. Mike, did you have something? Or
Yes. So the despise his birthright gives us a clue, because it doesn't say anything about him close to death, but it does say that despise his birthright. If he crawled in and said, "Please," and maybe Jacob would have given him something then too. Why didn't he run to his mom's tent and say, "Do you have anything, some leftover food, some bread?" But he despised his birthright, which tells us there was an evaluation taking place and he didn't choose the right way.
definitely, and that's the important point here, which we're going to really draw out. And one other point, though, as far as his hunger, it does say in the beginning of chapter 26, verse 1, which we'll look at in a bit, there was a famine in the land, which is fairly common because there was a famine in the time of Abraham. There's going to be a famine in the time of Joseph, so it happened, apparently. But yeah, so the food was scarce. There was a famine. And so again, maybe he was that hungry. Up here, Matt Lee. Oh, I'm sorry, Linda, I didn't see your hand.
To me, it seems like right from the start, it tells you what's going to happen, because one of them, he likes going out hunting and being of the earth, and the other one dwells in tents. He probably reads and does math. But I'm just saying, so the other guy, he's brawn and he'd rather fight to get what he wants. And the other one just goes, there's going to come a time when I can just say something, and he'll say, sure, no way, because he knows them. They're twins.
That's right.
So he probably just sat back and waited and then took the opportunity when it came.
And you're
And the
right.
guy
I
didn't
think
miss it,
Jacob
it seems
knew
like.
what his brother was like,
Yes.
and that he could, he might be able to buy his birthright.
Yeah.
And the reason was, as it says here, because Esau did not think that very highly of something God was precious to God, which was the birthright and the lineage of what would come down eventually to Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, it would be smarts over brawn.
Okay, there you go.
That's the whole thing.
In this case, the smart went out. That's right. I gotcha.
I think we get a clue when we see that Esau was a man of the field. The birthright meant that he got 2/3 of his father's inheritance.
Double portion.
So he was going to reap flocks and herds and servants and things of that nature, which really wasn't too important to Esau. He'd rather be out hunting.
Maybe. Maybe he
Jacob was
valued
more
that more.
one who wanted to take care of the herds, the flocks, the family. So,
But it wasn't just the stuff, it was the nation. and you became the one that the nation would come through, and your brother served you. I mean, so you were in a position too, which I guess maybe didn't matter to him very much either.
That's what I'm thinking,
Yeah.
that was Esau's personality, that he really didn't care that much about the birthright.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's read a passage in the New Testament that refers to this event.
Hey, Bill?
And it's, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
I just wanted to make a quick comment. You know, we wondered about why and which parent preferred which child. Let's not forget that Rebecca received a prophecy that the younger
Yes.
the older would serve the younger. So was that simply her putting in her support for the one whom God had told her would be the leader of the two? Maybe she, and I wonder about that.
But I'll tell you what we're going to find out here is that even though Esau was a jerk and Jacob seemed to be okay, it wasn't even because of that God chose for Jacob to take the birthright. We're going to see that in the passage. Might have had something, but it's like even before that was going to happen, we'll see it says God had chosen. Joe.
And you just made the comment that makes me think, you said Esau was a jerk and Jacob was doing okay. Esau came in very hungry and asked for a bowl of soup.
Yeah.
And Jacob said, here's my chance, I can get what I
that's right.
want.
Yeah.
And, you know, and it's referred
wasn't
to
great
as
either, was he?
Esau was ungodly, but Jacob was godly. And
No.
I look at this and I think, there is nothing godly about what Jacob
Well,
just
and
did
wait till
here.
we get to just the next few passages where it talks about how he deceives his father.
Yeah, and so we
And
always
even
look
says
at
God is helping me here. So
yeah,
we'll
we
look
look
at
at
that. You're
the
right.
God of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and right here Jacob to me I'm looking at him pretty bad. I'm looking at
You know, what
you
is-
caused all this mess.
What is a positive about him is that he valued what God valued as far as the birthright and the lineage. So that much we know. Let's read this passage. Your good points, guy. I mean, this is right. I wonder the same thing. Is it time to wake up? No, it's just time to check the monitor there. Okay, let's look at Hebrews 12, verse 14, beginning. And we're instructed to pursue peace with all people and holiness, without which no one will see the Lord, looking carefully lest anyone fall short of the grace of God. So here's a warning, everybody, to each one of us. Don't want to fall short. Lest any root of bitterness springing up cause trouble, and by this many become defiled, lest there be any fornicator, we know that's bad, or profane person like Esau, who for one morsel of food sold his birthright. For you know that after when he wanted to inherit the blessing, he was rejected, for he found no place for repentance, though he sought it diligently with tears. We're not quite to that part yet. The blessing comes a little bit later. So here, this birthright, because he did this, he's called a profane person. Now, a profane person is simply, it's somebody who doesn't value the things that are important. He treats common the things that God treats as special. The birthright was very special, and he sold it for a cup of soup. And that earned him the privilege of being a terrible example that we don't want to follow. So, but it's a good example. We don't want to be the profane, and that word, we don't use that very much, but it just simply means somebody who is taking something holy or important and treats it as common or unimportant. And he knew what he was doing, I think. He knew what he was doing. Let's look at another passage. In Hebrews again, a few chapters earlier, and where we have again this so much drawn to each of us, because we're not living back at that time. We don't really have the birthrights that they do, and land inheritance and all these things, like Mike mentioned. But we do have something very precious that we don't want to count as being not that important. And let's just see what that is. Verse 26 of Hebrews 10, for if we willfully sin, or sin willfully, after we have received the knowledge of the truth, there no longer remains a sacrifice for sins, but a certain fearful expectation of judgment and fiery indignation which will devour the adversaries. Anyone who has rejected Moses' law dies without mercy on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. Of how much worse punishment do you suppose will be thought worthy who has trampled the Son of God underfoot, counted the blood of the covenant by which he was sanctified a common thing, same word, profane, and insulted the Spirit of grace? For we know him who said, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. And again, the Lord will judge his people. It is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of a living God. One of the most scariest passages in the Bible right here. But it's describing somebody who would be like Esau, who just physical blessings of the inheritance which he received, he didn't care for. What about us? Are we going to throw away what we have with Jesus Christ for a few years of pleasure in this world, or something that we count as more important than our relationship with him or walking in his footsteps? That's what's tempting Christians continually, tempts you and I all the time. We look and we see, what are we going to do? What are we going to spend our time on? What are we going to really care about? Well, let's care about the things that are valuable, that are eternal. We don't want to be like Esau and put something ahead of, in place of, our spiritual commitment to Christ and to our Father. So these are the things. Why do we read the Old Testament? For reasons like this. So we can draw the example that we don't want to be like Esau. We want to value what God values. Okay. And that brings us to the next chapter, and it's time to stop, and we'll talk about Isaac and Abimelech there. You got any more comments? We'll close up here. Thank you for the comments and the questions and the participation. Appreciate it.